بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today is lesson number 2, second lesson in our discussion of Al-Qadr in the book, and it is lesson number 37 in the whole series. In the previous lesson, we started talking about Al-Qadr, the foundation regarding Al-Qadr and Ash-Shara', which is the legislation. So we have the divine decree, and then we have the divine legislation. And in the first part, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he defined for us what is Al-Qadr. Al-Qadr is simply Allah determining what has been and what is to be in past and future eternity. Right? So this is a short explanation of what we mean by Al-Qadr. It is Allah determining, decreeing things that have happened in the past, are going to happen in the future. And Allah Azza wa Jal decreeing this. We spoke, in the previous lesson, we kind of just introduced the topic, and we spoke about why this is important. It's important because we want to answer a number of questions. The fact that Allah Azza wa Jal decrees things, He decrees things, He created everything and He decrees things, and then He also legislates things. So is there a contradiction, or is there an agreement between Allah decreeing the actions of the servants and then Him legislating the law and saying, if you do this, you will be rewarded, and if you do this, you will be punished, and then the reward and the punishment? Is there any conflict between all of this, or is it all in perfect agreement and it reflects the wisdom and the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? This is a question that's going to be answered as we proceed through these lessons, because as we mentioned in the previous lesson, that there are some groups or some people who try to claim, who did claim, that there's a conflict between Al-Qadr and between the revelation, the Shara', the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there's different types of groups, and so we're going to look at that and explore that inshallah ta'ala. But in the first lesson, we looked at this first opening statement and the fact that Al-Iman is from the 6 pillars, that Al-Qadr is from the 6 pillars of Al-Iman. To believe in Allah, the angels, the books, the messengers, the last day, and Al-Qadr, the good and the bad of it. So we mentioned some of the important benefits of believing in Al-Qadr. It makes a person strong, it makes a believer strong, it makes him resilient. We explained how when we look at atheists, we see that they have the high suicide rates because they despair with life and with calamities, and they are unable to handle life because there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's no hereafter. There's no accounting, there's no reward, there's no justice. So they in these kind of societies, you see high levels of suicide compared to Muslim nations. And we gave you some data or information on that in the previous lesson. So starting today's lesson, then, what the Shaykh goes on to explain next is that he says, وَلِلْإِيمَانِ بِالْقَدَرِ مَرَاتِبْ أَرْبَعٍ. So now that we come to look at in detail about how do we believe in Al-Qadr, how do we believe in Al-Qadr? And the scholars of the Muslims, they have looked into the Quran they have looked into the Sunnah, and they have found that Allah Azza wa Jal, Him decreeing everything to be in creation, it has 4 steps and 4 levels. And these 4 steps and 4 levels collectively, they comprise Al-Qadr. They are Al-Qadr, the Qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are 4 levels as to how this Qadr occurs and comes to be. Right? So we shall go through each of these 4 levels inshallah ta'ala. In today's lesson we'll probably cover the first 2. So he says, Al-Martabatul Ula, the first level is to believe Al-Imanu bi anna Allah ta'ala قد علم بعلمه الأزلي والأبدي ما كان وما يكون من صغير وكبير وظاهر وباطن مما يكون من أفعاله أو أفعال مخلوقاته. Right? So this is now the first level. What is the first level? The first level is to have firm belief, iman, that Allah the Most High has known with His eternal knowledge. So in His knowledge there is no beginning or there's no end. His knowledge is eternal. So He knows with His eternal knowledge what has happened and what is to happen of every small thing, every large thing, every apparent thing, every hidden thing, and this includes what is to happen from His own actions and from the actions of His servants. Right? So it includes His own actions and the actions of His servants. This is the level martabatul ilm, the level of knowledge. Right? Here we are affirming that Allah Azza wa Jal has knowledge of all things. And the second level, we'll mention it now and then we'll look at the proofs. The second level is al-imanu bi anna Allah ta'ala المرتبة الثانية الإيمان بأن الله تعالى كتب في اللوح المحفوظ مقادير كل شيء حتى تقوم الساعة فما من شيء كان أو يكون إلا وهو مكتوب مقدر قبل أن يكون. The second level now is that we have firm belief, we have iman, that Allah the Exalted has written in Al-Lawh Al-Mahfuz, Al-Lawh Al-Mahfuz, which is a register or a tablet, preserved tablet. He has written therein the decrees of every single thing until the establishment of the hour. And so there is no thing that has happened or is yet to happen except that it is written and decreed before it comes to be. Before it comes to be. This now is the second level, which is martabatul kitaba, which is the level of writing. The level of writing. So, Shaykh al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, commenting upon these 2 levels before we come to the actual evidences, the Shaykh says that the first level that we mentioned about his knowledge is that we have iman that in the knowledge of Allah, that Allah's knowledge encompasses every single thing. And Allah has explained this in the Quran, that Allah's knowledge encompasses every single thing from so many different angles. He said, لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. In order that you may know that Allah is powerful over all things and that Allah has encompassed every single thing in knowledge. Okay, so this now is an evidence for the knowledge of Allah, for the ilm of Allah, that it encompasses every single thing. He knows every single thing. And the Shaykh says, how do we know this? Because in the ayah it said, بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. This indicates generality, that everything includes everything. And so this includes the small, the large, the apparent, the open, the inward, the hidden, and that which relates to His own actions and the actions of the creation itself. A second evidence that the Shaykh brings to prove this is the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran that He is Alimul Ghaybi wa Shahada. Alimul Ghaybi wa Shahada, which means that He is the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the knower of that which is unseen and that which is seen. And so again, the word unseen, al-ghayb, refers to every unseen thing which is unseen to us, and ash-shahada refers to everything which can be observed and witnessed. Now this is obviously varies, it is relative. So what is seen and unseen to one person is different to another person. What is seen and unseen to the angels is different to what is seen and unseen to us. What is seen and unseen to the jinn is different to the seen and unseen to us. Right? So this is something relative. And even amongst mankind, in terms of what Allah has created, there are some things that are outside the realm of the human ability to see. Right? So we cannot see the angels, we cannot see the jinn in their original form, we cannot see hellfire, we cannot see paradise, we cannot see many of the things which are created, that we do not have the means or the ability to see what is beyond the heavens and so on and so forth. We can't see these things. We are unable to see these things. There are some things which are from the unseen at one time, then they become from the seen at another time, such as, for example, some of the created asbab, or the ways and the means, some of the things that we discover, for example. So everything in creation, everything that exists, in fact, not in creation, but everything which exists is either from the seen or from the unseen. And this is how in the Quran existence is divided, right, into the seen and the unseen. And so we believe in all of the unseen. Whatever is from the unseen, we believe in it in a general sense, even though we may not know the specifics of those kind of existences. So anyhow, the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah the Mighty and Majestic, He is described as Alimul Ghaybi wa Shahada, this is another evidence to show that He is the knower of all things, indicating His knowledge. Also, another evidence is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, Inna Allaha la yakhfa alayhi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama. Indeed, Allah, there is nothing hidden from Him in the heaven and nor the earth. Nothing hidden. So this now is a negation. If nothing is hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that He has knowledge of all things, the opposite is true. So this is a negation of Him being ignorant of something, and it implies the perfect opposite, which is that He has perfect knowledge of all things. And that's a third evidence to support Allah's knowledge of all things. The fourth evidence is one of the actual evidences that we shall look at in the main body of the text, in which Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَمَا تَسْقُطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. To Him, meaning to Allah, belong the keys of the unseen. The keys of the unseen. None knows them except for He. And He knows what is in the land and what is in the sea. And no leaf falls except that He knows it. And nor any seed in the darkness of the earth, nor anything dry, nor anything moist or wet, except that it is in a clear book, a manifest book, recorded in a book. So here are 3 or 4 verses. What do all of these verses prove? What do they show? They show and prove the generality of Allah's knowledge, how it encompasses every single thing in a general sense, in a specific sense. There are many, many evidences in the Quran for all of this. Okay, so the next question now is, what is the fruit of having this knowledge? What is the fruit of having firm belief, firm conviction that Allah is the knower of all things? And the Shaykh answers that the answer to that is that the fruit of having this knowledge and having this firm belief is that it carries a person to be observant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have muraqabah, which means to be observant and to know that Allah knows what you are doing and is observing you and seeing you and hearing you. And so therefore a servant will be led to keep away from what Allah has prohibited, and he will do what Allah has commanded because he knows Allah knows that. And the Shaykh gives an example that if, for example, you had a leader or someone in charge of your affairs and he knew everything you say and what you do and what you abandon, this knowledge, your knowledge that you are being watched, will cause you to be observant and to be fearful of him. And we all know this. And even if someone was to say, as the Shaykh says, إِنَّ عِنْدَكَ إِسْتِخْبَارَاتٍ تُبْلِغُ رَئِيسَكَ بِمَا تَفْعَلْ أَوْ مَا تَتْرُكْ, that there are there's types like spying. There's some observation taking place, which will inform the leader or the head of what you are doing and what you are abandoning. Right? You would be cautious. You just merely having that knowledge would make you be cautious. And we know this from our experience, that we know when we are being watched. There could be CCTV, there could be someone watching over you. You know that your actions and even what you write or what you type, it's not secret. It's being monitored, it's being watched. You are going to be careful what you say, what you do. Everybody knows this, and we know this directly from our experience. And so this knowledge, if you truly believe in this firmly, then you will make muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this knowledge is really truly firm and present, within you. And that's why you see that people who have no iman, they do not have any iman in Allah, have no iman that they are being watched, that their deeds are being recorded, that they will be resurrected, that they will be held to account. People who do not have this type of iman, you see that they are the ones who commit, they have the greatest evil with them, and they have the greatest evil and oppression and conduct with them, because they do not believe in Allah, believe that they are being watched, or believe that they will be held to account. So this is the first level, belief that Allah has knowledge of all things. And then the second level that we mentioned, the Shaykh also comments upon that briefly before we look at the actual evidences in the main body of the text. The second level is that this knowledge has now been to have firm belief that Allah has written everything in a preserved tablet. So the Shaykh says this record or this register, which we call in Arabic al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the safeguarded tablet, we do not know what this is. Right? What is the preserved tablet? We don't know what this is. Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. And no detailed knowledge has come to us from the Quran, from the Sunnah about it. And we don't really need to know any particular details. What is the Lawh? What is it? What's the substance it's made from? How large is it? How bulky, how heavy is it? What's its color? We don't need to know that. But the thing which is important for us to know is that there is something in which all of the decrees have actually been written, irrespective of whether this lawh, whether it is small or whether it is large. All of that is irrelevant. What we need to know is every single thing has been recorded. The Shaykh says, Allah Azza wa Jal, ala kulli shay'in qadir, He is powerful over all things. And, sometimes he says that a man might think it very, very far-fetched that something small can have so many things written in it, right? Something relatively small, so much can be written upon that thing. However, the Shaykh says we know, for example, that it is possible, even if you take, for example, just the space of a fingernail, right? Many, many hundreds of words could be written on just the small space to the extent of just a fingernail. We know this even just from experience, that you can, or you do have the ability to write something, using a laser or something very, very minute. Well, they do it on banknotes, they do it on, so small that you can write so much in a very small amount of space. Now, this, while we're on this point, I should mention that even with the advances of technology, that say, for example, at the moment we have base 2, all of computing is based upon base 2, like you have a 1 or a 0, right? So, you can have 8-bit. 8-bit means you have 8 places where it can be a 1 or a 0. And through that, you can have potentially 132 characters, right? So if you 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 plus 32 plus 64, you keep doubling up. You have what's called 8-bit, and you can store 132 or whatever characters. So you can store all the alphabet, you can store lowercase, uppercase, that's 52. You can do all symbols and whatever, and you have characters which can be stored in 8-bit using just ones and zeros, right? That's the power of just a 1 or a 0, and you can store all that information, right? Now you can also have base 4, which is like what they say, the DNA, base 4, A, C, G, T. And then you exponentially multiply the amount of data that you can now store in a smaller and a smaller space, right? So for example, on a pinhead of DNA or something, or a small amount, you can store terabytes and terabytes of data. That's what they're telling us, right? So, if this is possible within the limits of man's knowledge, then how much more is it possible for the knowledge of every single thing, for it to be stored in ways that we probably don't even have knowledge of? How easy is that for Allah Azza wa Jal, if we, in our basic study of the creation, are able to, understand and achieve these things, right? Terabytes of data in small amounts of, and there's many other things that we haven't even discovered yet anyway, in terms of storage of actual information. There are so many ways that information can be stored, even the flickering of light. You can have wireless transmission of data through just light bulbs flickering, in different ways. So all of this exists within the creation. And what we see in creation shows, all of it is evidence of the plausibility of what we are told of from the affairs of the unseen. Do you understand? So for example, this is what we find, the method in the Quran. In the Quran, for example, how is resurrection, how is it plausible? What's the evidence that resurrection, that we will be raised from the dead, that it's plausible? Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran, do you not see the rain, that we drive it, the wind, the clouds, it rains, it revives the earth after its death, out from the earth comes vegetation, the vegetation comes, then it gradually turns yellow, then it dies, then it falls back to the earth and it gets scattered, right? This is observable proof that we see all the time, day in, day out, every year, every season, of the dead coming out of the living and the living coming out of the dead, right? And Allah Azza wa Jal is the one who will resurrect you in exactly the same way. So the fact that we see resurrection taking place, this is evidence, direct evidence of the plausibility of resurrection, right? So the things that we see unobserved, they prove to us the plausibility of resurrection, for example. And here, likewise, we have angels who record all our deeds. We don't know how that recording is, But now that we know, especially now in the 21st century, that pretty much everything that you do by way of a device that you hold in your hand, where you've been, by GPS, what you're typing, even the microphone could be on, it could be recording what you are doing, the camera could be on, could be recording what you are doing, what you are saying, right? We can see how very easily it is, even just for mankind, to observe and watch pretty much all of your moves and all of your actions. And if you want to put something inside under the skin, then through that you can even detect, emotions and things like that as well, right? So if that's something that man can achieve, then how can it not be the case that the angels and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of all of mankind and all of these ways and means, that he does not have knowledge of everything and everything that is being done, and for that to be recorded as well. Right? So therefore we have firm belief. We have firm belief that everything which has been decreed has indeed been written down. And we have clear evidence of that this isn't something far-fetched. This is something totally plausible. And it's something that, we have clear evidence for just from our limited experience from, in the life of this world. So the Shaykh goes on to say, why has this preserved tablet been called mahfuz? Why is it called preserved? Why is it safeguarded? It is because it is safeguarded from being changed. Right? So what is written in the Lawh al-Mahfuz cannot be changed. And it cannot be, because Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. Right? So He says, Allah erases and affirms whatever He wills. And with Him is the mother of the book, the Ummul Kitab. Okay, so what is this verse referring to? The verse is referring to two things. The Ummul Kitab is the mother of the book, is the Lawhul Mahfuz, right? This is the one in which everything is written and nothing can be changed, right? However, there is another record of things which is present with the angels. So the angels have a record of deeds that they write about you and so on and so forth. It's in the hands of the angels. Now here, things are written and they can be erased. So for example, when the angels are writing, you commit a sin, it is written, you make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the sin is erased, it's gone. Right? This is as it relates to what the angels have of the scrolls and what is being written. Here there's change, there's alteration in terms of what the angels have. But as for what is in the Lawhul Mahfuz, then there's no change in any of that, because that includes everything. That you committed a sin and then you made tawbah. Right? It's all there. Nothing is erased, nothing is changed, nothing is removed. It is a record of everything that is done, the actions of the servants, and so on and so forth. So the Lawh al-Mahfuz, it is preserved from being changed and altered. This is one meaning of why it is called Mahfuz, why it is described as being preserved. And also from another angle, it is preserved in the sense that no one is able to have access. No one can access this preserved tablet except by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no one can get to it, change what's in it, not even look at it, except by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything is obviously written in there. And so this is also a refutation. You find many of these Sufis, there are Sufis, these people who like to misguide people, and they try to give them a cheap and easy salvation, the easy route to paradise. You find it with Sufis. And one of the things they claim is that their Sufi sheikhs, they have access to the preserved tablet. They are able to access, because they are Allah's pious friends and they have, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they can peek into the preserved tablet, and they can basically, find out what and a lot of these people, they also do sihr, they do magic, and they worship the jinn, the devils who tell them information, and then they make it look as if they are taking this from the preserved tablet, right? So all sorts of lies and deception and things. But what we know is that the preserved tablet is preserved, as its title says. It is preserved from change, and it is preserved from being accessed. No one can access the Lahul Mahfuz except by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next issue the Shaykh mentions, before we look at the verses or the evidences, did Allah Azza wa Jal write the preserved tablet himself with his hand? And the answer is no. Allah Azza wa Jal did not write the decrees in the preserved tablet with his own hand. There's a hadith in which the Prophet, he said, أول ما خلق الله القلم ثم قال له اكتب قال وما أكتب قال القدر قال فكتب ما يكون وما هو كائن إلى أن تقوم الساعة. When Allah Azza wa Jal first created the pen, or the first of that which he created was the pen, then he said to it, write. And it said, what shall I write? And he said, Al-Qadar, the decrees. So then the pen wrote everything that is to be and what is to occur up until the establishment of the hour. Now here, although it is the pen that wrote, we can still ascribe the action to the one who commanded the pen to write. Right? It can be ascribed to Allah. For example, the Shaykh says, let's say you say, the king built the castle. The king built his castle. But did the king really build his castle? No. He ordered the castle to be built. He paid people to build it. He ordered people to build it. So effectively, he is the one who built it through other people. But we can say this in the language, that, the king built his castle. So in the same way, al-kitaba, this writing of the pen, because it is Allah Azza wa Jal who created the pen, and the pen wrote and did as it was commanded, then this is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah wrote the decrees, meaning by way of the pen, or through the pen. And likewise, we see in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِن بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. We indeed wrote in the Zabur, meaning in the Psalms that were given to David, to Dawood alayhi salam. We indeed wrote in there after the dhikr, meaning the preserved tablet, that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous servants. Okay? So this is just general commentary upon the first two levels. The level of knowledge. Allah has knowledge of everything that is to occur. And then that knowledge has been written down in the preserved tablet. And then in the main body of the text we have a number of evidences. So we have two verses in which we see the mention of both knowledge and of writing in the same verse. Okay? So the first verse is in Surah Al-Hajj, which is chapter number 22. And in this verse, chapter number 22, verse number 70, 22:70. In this verse, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. So Allah says, do you not know that Allah knows what is in the heaven and in the earth? Indeed, that is in a book. Indeed, that is easy for Allah. Okay, so here we can clearly see that there are two things mentioned here. The ilm of Allah, يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah knows that which is in the heaven and the earth. So the ilm is mentioned here. And then also the kitab, the writing, because at the end of the verse it says, إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. Indeed, that is in a book, and indeed that is easy for Allah. Meaning it is easy for Allah to put all of that in a book. Okay, so this now is a clear evidence that Allah Azza wa Jal has knowledge of all things. And likewise, the other verse, the second verse that is mentioned as a proof, this is in Surah Al-An'am, chapter 6, verse number 59. Chapter 6, verse number 59. وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ. To Allah belongs the keys of the unseen. لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ. No one knows them except for Him. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. He knows that which is on the land and that which is in the sea. وَمَا تَسْقُطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا. No leaf falls except that He knows it. وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. And nor is there any seed in the darknesses of the earth, nor anything dry nor moist, except that it is in fi kitabin mubin, a clear, conspicuous book, a clear book. Once again, what do we see in this verse? The first two levels of qadr mentioned together. The ilm of Allah, to Allah belong the keys of the unseen, none knows them except for He, and He knows that which is in the land and that which is in the sea. Right? So this is the ilm of Allah. And the ilm of Allah encompasses any leaf that falls from any tree and any seed that is buried, hidden in the ground. He knows all of that. And likewise at the end, إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ, except that it is in a clear book. Right? So these are the two levels mentioned in this ayah. The Shaykh then goes on to explain to us that what does it mean وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ, that to Allah belong the keys of the unseen. He says the keys of the unseen are mentioned in another verse in the Quran, in which Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثَ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ مَاذَا تَكْسِبُ غَدًا وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. Indeed, Allah, with Him is the knowledge of the hour. No one has knowledge of the hour. And He is the one who sends down the rain. And He knows what is in the wombs. And no soul knows what it is going to earn tomorrow. And no soul knows in which land, which place it is going to die. Right? These are 5 things which are from the keys of the unseen. And why is it called a key? Why are these affairs called a miftah? It is because each of these things, they open the door to something else. Right? That's why these 5 things from the mafatih, from these, from the keys of the unseen. So he says, for example, knowledge of the hour, ilmu as-sa'a, when is the hour going to take place? This is the opening or the key for the hereafter. Right? So when the hour occurs, that now is the key to open the hereafter. That's why the hour is a miftah. Likewise, the sending of the rain is a key for the revival of the earth. So when the rain comes down upon dry, barren land, then we see the vegetation appear. So the rain is a miftah, is a key for the revival of the earth. Similarly, the wombs, what is in the wombs, meaning, it doesn't mean male or female, but it means what's being produced in the womb in terms of the being and its deeds, and is it an inhabitant of paradise or inhabitant of hellfire? What is it producing? What is it containing? What is the womb containing in all of these respects? So again, none knows that except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the womb, what is in the womb, that is an opening, is a key to life. Right? So for the embryo, for whoever's in the womb, right? What is in the womb is an opening or a key for actual life. Likewise, what you are going to earn tomorrow. So today's today, tomorrow is the future. So tomorrow, is an opening for the future. It is a miftah for the future. And likewise, no one knows in which land they are going to die. Then death is an opening, it is the key, it is the miftah for the barzakh, for the intermediate stage between this life and the next. So this is why these affairs are referred to as keys. Then the Shaykh goes on to say that Allah's knowledge of what is on the land, what is on the sea, this applies to everything. Likewise, no leaf falls from the tree except that He knows it, and nor is there a seed in the darknesses of the earth. And here Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned darknesses in the plural. وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ ظُلُمَات. Why is darknesses mentioned in the plural? The Shaykh goes on to explain that if we look at this word darkness, we see that in the creation there are different levels of darkness. So for example, the first darkness is ظُلْمَةُ اللَّيْلِ, which is the darkness of the night, right? So we clearly see the sun disappears and goes. We have the darkness of the night. That's one type of darkness. Then you have ظُلْمَةُ السَّحَابِ. Then you have the darkness of the clouds. You can see right now, it was sunny earlier on in the afternoon. There's a level of darkness brought about by the clouds. So the clouds themselves have a level or a layer of darkness. Then likewise you have ظُلْمَةُ الْمَطَرِ. Right, so even though it's cloudy and it's not raining, the clouds still bring a level of darkness. But then when it rains, like it was now and earlier on, there's an extra level of darkness that you have compared to when it's not raining. And that's because the rain itself, as the Shaykh goes on to explain, that the rain itself, when the rain falls, then obviously you're unable to see in the far away, so it blocks the light. So that's another level or layer of darkness. Then you have ظُلْمَةُ الْبَحْرِ. You have the darkness in the sea. So when you go into the sea, as you go further and further down, you can see less and less and less, because the light cannot reach and penetrate all the way down. And so you reach right at the bottom, it is totally dark and you can't see anything. Right? That's another level of darkness. And likewise, there's also darkness in the actual levels and layers of the earth. So, as you go further down, the light, in the soil, and as you go further down in the soil, the light totally disappears, although it might be accessible at the higher levels. So all of these are different types of darkness which exist in the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that's why we see this word ظُلُمَات mentioned in the plural. So all of these verses that we looked at, all of them, they are evidence from the Quran for Allah's knowledge and His writing down of the decrees which are to occur, until the establishment of the hour. Okay, next the Shaykh goes on to mention some of the hadiths as proof, right? So he mentions a couple of hadith. We mentioned them, we can finish with these inshallah ta'ala. The first hadith is a hadith reported by Al-Bukhari in his Sahih, from the hadith of Imran bin Hussein, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, كان الله ولم يكن شيء قبله وكان عرشه على الماء ثم خلق السماوات والأرض وكتب في الذكر كل شيء. This hadith is in Al-Bukhari, reported by Imran bin Hussein radiyallahu anhu. He said, the Prophet said, there was Allah and there was nothing before Him, and His throne was above the water. Then He created the heavens and the earth, and He wrote in the dhikr, the remembrance, meaning the preserved tablet. He wrote every single thing. This is one hadith. Then we have the hadith of Ubadah bin Samit radiyallahu anhu, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْقَلَمَ فَقَالَ اكْتُبْ قال رب وما أكتب قال أكتب مقادير كل شيء حتى تقوم الساعة. He said that he heard the Messenger of Allah say, indeed, when Allah first created the pen, He said to it, write. And it said, O my Lord, what shall I write? And it said, write the decrees of everything until the hour is established. So, from all of this discussion, the Shaykh explains that we see that in these hadiths, compared to the verses, if you look at the verses that we used as proof, in the verses it mentioned knowledge and writing explicitly. Right? In those two verses that we looked at, it mentioned the knowledge of Allah and it mentioned the writing down of everything, of the decrees. In this hadith, in these two hadiths, there's only mention of the writing. And obviously we know that writing is not possible unless knowledge is present first. So what is maktub, written, has to first be ma'loom, has to be known. Right? So it is necessitated and necessary that writing implies prior knowledge. So this is why these hadiths, even though they do not explicitly mention the knowledge of Allah, it is necessitated by the fact of writing that this is also a proof of Allah's knowledge, right? So by necessity, these two hadiths also comprise an evidence for the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it is not explicitly mentioned in these two hadiths. However, in the Quran, in the verses of the Quran, as you've heard, there's explicit mention of the level of knowledge and the level of writing. Then the Shaykh goes on to explain the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Allah wrote the decrees before He created the heavens and the earth by 50,000 years. 50,000 years. The Shaykh goes on to explain, someone might say, how can there be 50,000 years when we know that before the creation there is no night, there is no day, there's no months, because the years are determined by the months, 12 months. So how can there be 50,000 years? And the Shaykh says the answer is, what this is referring to is to the equivalent of 50,000 years. Right? The miqdar, the extent or the equivalent of 50,000 years. And the Shaykh goes on to explain, it goes on to mention some issue about how there will come a time, for example, in the time of Dajjal, يمكث الدجال في الأرض في الأرض 40 يوما السنة اليوم كالشهر واليوم كالجمعة so on and so forth to the end of the hadith. Right? The Dajjal will remain upon the earth for 40 days. One day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a Jum'ah, one day like a week, and the rest of the days are like the rest of the days. So the Shaykh says he's referring to this hadith to show that there will be a time in the future, for whatever reason we don't know. Some of the scholars say that maybe the sun might be blocked out. Some of the scholars say that maybe the sun's motion might be paused or something. Right? There's different reasons that scholars give. But there will come a time when a day will be like a year, and then a month, and then a week. Right? So the point being here is that even though the sun is not necessarily moving according to that interpretation, the time is still the same amount of time, right? So you can estimate the time or say the time is such and such without there being the actual measurement of time available, right? So in the same way, in that hadith, Allah wrote all of the decrees 50,000 years before He created the heavens and the earth. Then that time given can be given without there being the actual measurement, right? Which is the sun and the moon and the motion of the moon, whatever. So this is how the Shaykh answers the misconception or the doubt regarding that. And then finally, the Shaykh goes on to discuss one final issue which arises from these hadiths, which is that was the first creation the pen? Was the pen the first thing that Allah created? Based upon that hadith, Inna awwala ma khalaqa Allahu al-qalam. And the answer is, what is correct is, no, this hadith doesn't mean verily the first thing that Allah created was the pen. What it means is, indeed, when Allah first created the pen, He said to it. Meaning that when Allah created the pen, He said to it, write. That's the meaning of this hadith. Right? So this is not a proof, because some people claim that the pen was the first thing created. But this hadith is not a proof for that. Rather, the first thing that was created, as the Shaykh goes on to explain, is that we know that the throne was present before the pen, and there's also the water. وَكَانَ عَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ. His throne was above the water, right? And the water was present before the pen as well. So the most correct view regarding what was the first, what was created first, was it the pen, was it the throne? Well, the throne came before the pen, right? And also in this hadith, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْقَلَمِ, that can just simply mean that the first thing that Allah created from this creation, is that He created the pen, then He ordered the pen to write down all the decrees. Right? So that creation of the pen signifies the first thing created from this particular creation. Right? So it doesn't mean that the pen was the very first thing created. Right? So some scholars hold that view, but it is a view that opposes the actual evidences that we have. Now, this brings us right to the end of our discussion of the first two levels of Al-Qadr. The Shaykh goes on to mention level 3 and level 4. We'll discuss that in the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. But these two levels are levels which occur before the occurrence of the decree. Right? So remember, this knowledge is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Allah's eternal knowledge without beginning, without end. And also Allah wrote the decrees 50,000 years before actually creating the heavens and the earth. Which means that these two levels of Al-Qadr, they are before the thing being decreed, before the occurrence of the decree. This is the first two levels. And the second two levels that we should look at, they occur at the time of the thing being decreed, right? Which is Allah wills it, and then Allah creates it, brings it into being. We shall look at those two levels, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson. So with that, we'll conclude our lesson there for today. So today we started looking at the 4 levels of Al-Qadr, which are a basic foundation in understanding Al-Qadr in the correct way. Once we've laid these foundations, inshallah, we look in further lessons into some of the mistakes made by the people of innovation and misguidance. So with that, we'll conclude our lesson there for today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.